Imagine, if you will, a ship. Not just any ship, but a steel behemoth stretching longer than 2.5 American football fields laid end to end. A floating fortress weighing over 70,000 tons, clad in armor thick enough to shrug off projectiles that could demolish lesser vessels. At its heart, cannons of such monstrous size they remain the largest ever mounted on a warship, capable of hurling shells weighing more than a small car over 25 miles. This wasn't science fiction. This was the Musashi, a super battleship of the Imperial Japanese Navy, a titan born in secrecy and destined for a dramatic, fiery end. Sister ship to the even more famous Yamato, the Musashi represented the absolute apex of battleship design, a concept Japan clung to even as the storm clouds of World War II gathered and the roar of aircraft engines began to signal a new era of naval warfare. Why build such colossal vessels when the aircraft carrier was already proving its deadly potential? Japan, facing the industrial might of the United States, knew it couldn't compete ship for ship in sheer numbers. The strategy, therefore, was quality over quantity. Build battleships so powerful, so individually superior, that they could engage and destroy multiple enemy counterparts, tipping the scales in any fleet engagement. The Yamato class, Musashi included, was the ultimate expression of this ambitious and perhaps ultimately flawed doctrine. The birth of this giant was shrouded in extraordinary secrecy. Construction began at the Mitsubishi shipyard in Nagasaki on March 29, 1938. The shipyard itself became a fortress of concealment. The building dock was deepened, its gantry cranes heightened, and massive screens made from hemp rope, weighing hundreds of tons, were erected to shield the growing hull from prying eyes, especially aerial reconnaissance. Workers were sworn to absolute secrecy, their movements restricted, living under the constant shadow of the Kempeitai, Japan's feared military police. The goal was to keep the ship's true dimensions, and especially the unprecedented size of her main armament, those colossal 18.1-inch guns, a complete secret from the Allies. They succeeded for a time. When Musashi was finally ready for launch on November 1, 1940, the event itself was orchestrated with cloak-and-dagger precision. To prevent crowds from gathering and witnessing the scale of the ship entering the water, a citywide air raid drill was staged in Nagasaki, forcing residents indoors. As the immense hull slid into the harbor, displacing a staggering amount of water, it created a nearly 4-foot wave, a mini tsunami, that surged through the harbor and adjacent rivers, flooding homes and capsizing small fishing boats. A dramatic entrance for a ship destined for drama. After fitting out, Musashi was officially commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy on August 5, 1942. She was a true marvel of engineering. 862 feet long, with a beam of 127 feet and displacing, when fully loaded, nearly 73,000 long tons. Her armor belt, at its thickest along the waterline, was a staggering 16.1 inches of cemented steel, designed to withstand hits from guns of her own caliber. Her decks were armored to defend against plunging shells and aerial bombs. And then there were the guns. 9 Type 94, 18.1-inch naval rifles, mounted in 3 massive triple turrets. Each turret weighed around 2,700 tons, as much as a contemporary destroyer. These guns fired armor-piercing shells weighing 3,200 pounds, capable of reaching out over 26 miles. Her secondary armament was also formidable, initially including 12 6.1-inch guns in 4 triple turrets, later reduced to make way for more anti-aircraft weapons. She also carried numerous 5-inch dual-purpose guns and, eventually, a huge number of 25mm anti-aircraft cannons, over 100 by 1944. Protection extended deep below the waterline, with extensive compartmentalization designed to contain flooding. She was, on paper, almost unsinkable by conventional naval gunfire. Despite her immense power, Musashi's early service life was surprisingly quiet, almost mundane for such a mighty warship. She arrived at Truk Lagoon, Japan's major Central Pacific naval base, in early 1943. For a time, she served as the flagship of the combined fleet, even hosting Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, before his death later that year. However, Japan seemed hesitant to risk its super battleships in direct combat, perhaps recognizing their irreplaceable value and the growing threat from American air power. Musashi spent much of 1943 sortied on several fleet movements, searching fruitlessly for American forces, but mostly acted as a heavily armed transport, ferrying troops and supplies between Japan and occupied islands. It was hardly the glorious fleet actions her designers had envisioned. Her first taste of real danger came not from enemy battleships, but from beneath the waves. On March 29, 1944, while returning to Japan, she was struck by a single torpedo fired by the American submarine USS Tunney. The hit was near the bow, causing relatively minor damage but flooding some compartments and wounding 18 crewmen. It was enough to force her back to Japan for repairs at Kure Naval Arsenal. This repair period saw a significant upgrade to her anti-aircraft suite. The two-wing 6.1-inch turrets were removed, replaced by more 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. Radar systems were improved, and dozens more 25mm cannons were added, bristling along her decks and superstructure. A tacit admission that the greatest threat came not from enemy ships, but from the sky. In June 1944, Musashi sailed as part of the Japanese fleet during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, often called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, due to the catastrophic losses suffered by Japanese naval aviation. Musashi herself, however, fired her main guns only once, deploying special anti-aircraft fragmentation shells known as Sanshikidan, or beehive shells, and made no contact with American surface forces. The battle was a disaster for Japan, crippling its carrier air power for good, and setting the stage for the final, desperate gamble Musashi would soon undertake. That gamble came in October 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, arguably the largest naval battle in history. With American forces landing in the Philippines under General MacArthur, the Imperial Japanese Navy concocted a complex and incredibly risky plan called Shogo 1, aiming to lure the main American carrier fleet away and allow a powerful surface force to penetrate Leyte Gulf and annihilate the vulnerable landing fleet. Musashi was assigned to Vice Admiral Takeo Kurida's powerful center force, the main surface strike group tasked with transiting the San Bernardino Strait and falling upon the American beachhead. Alongside her sister Yamato, battleships Nagato, Kongo, and Haruna, plus numerous heavy cruisers and destroyers, Musashi steamed from Brunei Bay on October 22nd, heading towards the Philippines and her destiny. The plan began to unravel almost immediately. American submarines Darter and Dace intercepted Kurida's force in the Palawan Passage on October 23rd, sinking 2 heavy cruisers, including Kurida's flagship Atago, and damaging a third. Kurida, forced to transfer his flag to Yamato, pressed on, but the element of surprise was lost. The Americans knew they were coming. On the morning of October 24th, as Kurida's center force steamed through the narrow confines of the Sibuyan Sea, the full fury of American naval aviation was unleashed upon them. Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet carriers, alerted to the Japanese presence, launched wave after wave of aircraft. Helldiver dive bombers, Avenger torpedo bombers, and Hellcat fighters. Initially, the American pilots seemed almost confused by the sheer size of Musashi and Yamato, mistaking them for different ships or underestimating their resilience. The first waves spread their attacks across the formation. Musashi maneuvered violently, her dozens of anti-aircraft guns filling the sky with smoke and tracers. Her main 18.1-inch guns even fired their Sanshikidan beehive shells, attempting to create curtains of shrapnel to deter attackers, though their effectiveness was questionable. Musashi took an early torpedo hit, which caused some flooding, but little serious damage. She reported the hit and plowed onward. Other ships in the formation weren't so lucky. The heavy cruiser Miyoko was severely damaged and forced to retire. But as the day wore on, the American attacks intensified and became increasingly focused. Kurida's force lacked air cover. Japanese fighters were desperately engaged elsewhere or simply unavailable. The American pilots, facing only anti-aircraft fire, could press home their attacks with devastating accuracy. They quickly realized that the Yamato-class ships were the priority targets. Around midday, a second major series of attacks commenced. Aircraft from the carriers Intrepid, Essex, and Lexington swarmed the Japanese formation. Musashi became a magnet for bombs and torpedoes. She suffered multiple hits. 3 torpedoes struck her port side, causing significant flooding and a 5-degree list. Water poured into machinery spaces, and 1 hit near the bow increased her draft forward by nearly 6 feet. Bomb hits damaged superstructure and knocked out some anti-aircraft mounts. 1 bomb penetrated the deck near a forward turret but failed to detonate the magazine. A stroke of luck. Another, however, damaged an engine room and disabled her port inner propeller shaft, reducing her speed. Despite counter-flooding measures to correct the list, Musashi was wounded, bleeding speed and beginning to lag slightly behind the main formation. The respite was brief. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, another wave struck. This time, Musashi absorbed at least 4 more torpedo hits and several direct bomb hits, including 1,000-pound armor-piercing bombs. The damage was becoming critical. Her forward sections were heavily flooded, pulling her bow down 13 feet. Her speed dropped further, now struggling to make 20 knots. The intricate compartmentalization designed to contain damage was being overwhelmed. With so many forward compartments breached, her margin of survivability was rapidly shrinking. She could no longer keep pace with Yamato and the rest of the fleet. Admiral Kurita, reluctant to jeopardize his entire mission for 1 crippled ship, ordered the fleet to press on, leaving Musashi behind with a screen of 2 destroyers, Kiyoshimo and Hamikaze, to fend for herself. Isolated, wounded, and trailing oil, the giant battleship became the sole focus of subsequent American airstrikes. Aircraft from Enterprise, Franklin, and Cabot joined the onslaught. Through the late afternoon, Musashi endured a relentless pounding. Reports vary slightly, but conservative estimates suggest she suffered at least 11 more bomb hits and 8, possibly 10 or more, additional torpedo impacts during these final waves. Armor designed to stop battleship shells was penetrated by bombs. Torpedoes ripped open her hull below the waterline, flooding more engine rooms and boiler rooms. Her bow was now practically submerged, water washing over the forecastle. Fires raged internally. Her list to port increased dramatically, reaching 10, then 12 degrees, despite desperate counter-flooding efforts that filled nearly all available starboard voids. Her speed bled away until she was almost dead in the water. Her anti-aircraft batteries, many damaged or destroyed, continued to fire defiantly, but the sheer volume of attackers overwhelmed them. Eyewitness accounts from American pilots described the scene. A colossal ship wreathed in smoke and explosions, listing heavily yet still fighting back. But the damage was mortal. By around 4:30 in the afternoon, the last attacks subsided. The American pilots, having expended their ordnance or needing to return to their carriers, left the stricken giant alone in the vast Sibuyan Sea. On board Musashi, chaos reigned, but discipline largely held. Rear Admiral Toshihira Inoguchi, the ship's commander, oversaw frantic damage control efforts, but it was hopeless. The flooding was unstoppable. The list worsened steadily. At 7:15 in the evening, with the list reaching 12 degrees, Admiral Inoguchi gave the order to prepare to abandon ship. He chose to go down with his vessel, retiring to his sea cabin. As the list increased rapidly past 30 degrees, Captain Kenkichi Kato, the ship's executive officer, gave the final order. Abandon ship, every man for himself. Panic inevitably broke out as nearly 2,400 men tried to escape the capsizing behemoth. At approximately 7:36 p.m., on October 24, 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy battleship Musashi rolled over completely onto her port side, paused for a moment as if in final defiance, and then slid beneath the waves. Bow first. She took with her Admiral Inoguchi and 1,023 officers and men, nearly half her crew. The destroyers Kiyoshimo and Hamikaze, dodging potential suction from the sinking giant, moved in to rescue the survivors, pulling 1,376 men from the oily water under the cover of darkness. The greatest battleship kill credited entirely to air power was complete. The sinking of Musashi was a profound shock to the Imperial Japanese Navy, but it barely registered as a pause for Kurita's center force, which continued its perilous journey towards San Bernardino Strait, eventually leading to the heroic but ultimately futile stand of the American escort carriers and destroyers off Samar the next day. Musashi's sacrifice, though incredibly valiant on the part of her crew, ultimately failed to significantly impede the Japanese operational plan, which itself was doomed to fail. Musashi's demise, along with Yamato's sinking less than 6 months later under similar circumstances, definitively signaled the end of the battleship era. These magnificent, powerful ships, the ultimate expression of naval gunnery and armor, were simply too vulnerable to concentrated air attack without dedicated air superiority, something Japan could no longer provide. They were titans born into an age that had already passed them by. For over 70 years, Musashi's final resting place remained a mystery. Eyewitness accounts varied. The Sibuyan Sea was deep, and the exact location was lost to time. Numerous expeditions searched for her in vain. Then, in March 2015, a team led by Microsoft co-founder and philanthropist Paul Allen, aboard his state-of-the-art research vessel MY Octopus, announced a stunning discovery. Using historical records, advanced bathymetric surveys, and a remotely operated vehicle, ROV, they had located the wreck of the Musashi. She rests in several pieces on the seabed, over 3,200 feet, 1 kilometer down. The ROV footage provided astonishing, haunting images. The massive bow section with the distinctive circular mounting point where the teak Imperial chrysanthemum seal once sat, enormous anchors still in place, giant 18.1-inch gun turrets dislodged by the sinking or underwater explosions, catapults for her float planes, and gaping holes torn by American torpedoes. The discovery brought closure to the families of those lost and provided invaluable historical insight into the final moments of this legendary warship. The site is treated as a war grave, a final resting place for over 1,000 souls, respected under international agreements. The story of the Musashi is one of immense power and potential, ultimately overcome by a fundamental shift in naval warfare. She was an engineering marvel, a testament to Japan's shipbuilding prowess, crewed by sailors who fought with incredible bravery against overwhelming odds. Yet her brief and tragic career serves as a stark reminder that even the mightiest giants can fall, and that the nature of war is constantly evolving. She remains a silent, submerged titan, an echo of a bygone era of naval giants. What can we learn from the tale of the Musashi? Perhaps it's a lesson in hubris, building giants for a fight that had already changed. Or maybe it's a testament to the sheer destructive power humans can unleash, and the courage of those who face it. Whatever you take away, her story is undeniably compelling. If you find these deep dives into naval history and the stories of legendary warships fascinating, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that button, because we've got plenty more sunken secrets and tales of iron giants to uncover together. Let me know in the comments what aspect of Musashi's story surprised you the most.